Meet a man on his way to work. The man is Mr. Brain. His work is among the most interesting you could find. Mr. Brain is a river pilot, a member of a very proud and select profession. His craft is as old as seafaring. His skill is the product of a tradition which has grown up along the waterways of the world. The Thames is his particular concern. London River, the greatest river in Britain. Like any seafarer starting the day, he makes his own careful assessment of the weather. Visibility is all important when you navigate such a busy, congested river as the Thames. Following our pilot, we arrive at the Gravesend headquarters of the Port of London Authority. The tidal stretch of the Thames, nearly 70 miles of it, is under the jurisdiction of the PLA. For the 200 pilots who operate from Gravesend, this building is a vital nerve center. First, a call at the chart room to meet the hydrographic officer. There is nothing constant about the Thames, and every day the pilot must acquaint himself with the state of the river. Are there any changes in the navigable channels? Are there any new wrecks, or have any existing ones been moved by the tide? What is the position of moored shipping, like dredgers? Such information is absolutely essential. It is hard enough navigating a large ship among the visible obstacles on a river. But there is a host of hazards beneath the surface, and the pilot must have an exact picture of what they are and where they lie. Already we can see something of the complexity of his job and the responsibility he must take. And we can appreciate the important service rendered by the Port of London Authority. A service first to the pilot and ultimately to the thousands of ships using this great artery of commerce. In the operations room, the pilot consults a large wall map which shows the exact position of all shipping in the river. The PLA maintains radio telephone contact with all vessels wishing to enter or leave the Port of London along the busy tideway of the Thames. Now, more news for our pilot. Information comes that his ship is approaching the boarding point just off Gravesend. Now his day has really begun. He will soon be boarding the pilot cutter which will take him out to the waiting ship. Mr. Brain's uniform, by the way, which is very similar to that of a Royal Navy or Merchant Navy officer, is the official rig of a Trinity House pilot. Trinity House was formed as a society for training pilots over 400 years ago. It certainly is an ancient. 600 pilots are licensed by Trinity House to handle shipping around the coast of Britain. Before the founding of Trinity House and the organization of an official pilot service, piloting was a haphazard business, to say the least of it. It was open to a lot of abuse by mariners and the pilots they employed. Indeed, the original object of the Trinity House Charter was to put an end to these abuses. It laid down a complete set of rules and regulations for piloting. The function of Trinity House is still to protect the interests of mariners both at sea and ashore. Likewise, it helps to maintain the high standard and reputation of the men who form the pilot service. As a Thames pilot, Mr. Brain is concerned with England's largest and most important river, the gateway to the Port of London. As Britain's leading port, it handles millions of tons of goods every year. In fact, the annual value of imports and exports flowing through this waterway exceeds £2,400 million. You see how vital it is to the country's prosperity, a prosperity which depends so much upon the efficient service of the PLA and the river pilots. The ship we and our pilot are interested in is the Durango, a 10,000 tonner bringing meat from the Argentine. She's just completed a round trip from London via Buenos Aires and Las Palmas. The pilot's cutter is certainly a welcome sight for the Durango. It means that her voyage is almost over. After 7 weeks afloat, the crew can relax a bit. They're almost home. But if the crew can relax, here's one man whose responsibility is just beginning. One man upon whose skill and experience depends the success of the whole enterprise. Only he, with his intimate knowledge of the river, is fully capable of the job. The pilot is followed by his helmsman. This is fairly common practice on many rivers. The pilot's cutter pulls away, and the main business is about to begin. It is just another day for a man who has reached the top of the ladder in his profession. The pilot's first duty is to meet the captain on the bridge. Captain Giller will tell him about any unusual features of the ship. There may be some fault in steering or engines. Some of the cargo may have shifted, which would call for extra care. After establishing that all is in order, the Durango gets underway. The final stage of her voyage has begun. The pilot's flag at the masthead signifies that the ship is now in his charge. At this stage, an important point to remember is the relationship between the pilot and the captain. A pilot never takes supreme command over the captain. The skipper still has an obligation to keep an eye on the safety of the ship, even though the pilot is giving the orders and his helmsman is at the wheel. Of course, the captain will never interfere unless under very exceptional circumstances. Instead, he becomes an interested spectator during the navigation of his ship. He also ensures that his officers and crew carry out the pilot's orders promptly and efficiently. The reliability of the pilot is accepted by all seafarers. That famous seafaring writer, Joseph Conrad, once remarked that to a sailor, a pilot was trustworthiness personified. This underlines the partnership between captain and pilot. Whatever hazards the pilot may have to face, the captain knows his vessel is in the best hands. With all his experience of the sea, knowledge is the pilot's precedence on the water he knows so well. One of the most immediate hazards is the thousands of barges on the Thames. Their speed and course must be judged very carefully. We're now passing one of the pilot boats. These are used to take pilots back to their base after finishing their assignments. Organized pilot services are much the same all over the world. They are manned by the pick of seafaring men. Their discipline and training is the result of centuries of fine seamanship. In this job, only the best is good enough. For instance, all Trinity House pilots must hold a master's certificate, and their examinations demand the highest standards. The good pilot knows his river like the back of his hand. The hazards of the river bed are as familiar to him as if he could see them. He knows exactly where the shallows lie, and where the channel becomes narrow through silting up. That dredger is helping to keep the navigable channels clear of silt. The Port of London Authority is responsible for all matters relating to navigation on the tideway, and one of its main jobs is to maintain the approach channel from the estuary into the heart of the port. We referred to the pilot as trustworthiness personified. One of the greatest tributes to his skill is written on the faces of the crew. They share their captain's complete confidence in him. It has not always been so. In the old days, the pilot had yet to win this trust. Under a 12th century law, the pilot who caused a ship to founder would be beheaded by the crew. Hello? Looks like trouble up ahead. The pilot sights the culprit, a ship changing course and getting too close for safety. The pilot's reaction is immediate. His orders, given with calm precision, are as swiftly answered by helmsman and engine room. It's all right. The danger is behind us. A close thing, but not too close, thanks to quick thinking by a pilot who kept his head. In the old days, he might easily have lost it, in more ways than one. Most of the journey is already behind us. We shall soon be approaching the wharf side where our cargo is to be unloaded. The crew are getting things shipshape, getting the derricks ready to lift the hatch covers so that our cargo of meat may be speeded on its way to the cold storage warehouses and eventually to our dinner tables. Meat is one of the main commodities handled in the Port of London. Others include sugar, grain, wool, tea and timber. We've already mentioned the importance of the port to British trade. It might surprise you, but over 75 million tons of shipping use London every year. That is over a third of all shipping using British ports. And all these ships, all these cargoes, depend on the pilots for their safe conveyance to and from the sea. The pilot rings down to stop engines. We are about to meet the tugs, which will take us in tow for the final stage. So we heave to. Orders come from the bridge to drop the anchor. The bell signals that all is ready for the tugs to approach. They will bring us into the lock. Using a whistle, the pilot signals his orders. Towing a ship often presents many problems to a pilot. A lot depends on the tug's response to his orders. Any delay in answering his directions could easily spoil the whole operation and at worst cause damage to the ship. The tugs take the strain and guide the Durango towards the lock. The lock gates open, and we approach slowly. There are 5 dock systems in the Port of London. Between them, they cover over 2,000 acres. There are 36 miles of quays and over 500 acres of warehouses and sheds. It's a fantastic system, built on a grand scale to cope with the vast traffic of shipping which uses it every day. Slowly and carefully, the tugs edge us through the lock, and the ropes are made ready for tying up. Now, at last, the Durango is home. The pilot's job is done. How well done, none knows better than the captain. A professional seaman is very much a realist. When he bestows praise, you can bet it is well deserved. The trust and respect of captains and their crews are among the pilot's finest rewards. All seamanship is a discipline. Few branches of seamanship carry such responsibility as pilotage. Few jobs demand so much from one man. The pilot is a walking encyclopedia. His reference books are in his head, alongside his vast fund of experience, ready to supply the right answer to any problem at a moment's notice. When one is a pilot, no 2 days are ever the same. That is part of the fascination, and that is the reason for the high standards required. Today it was a 10,000-tonner. Tomorrow, a different ship and a different set of problems. But fair weather or foul, every ship is a fresh challenge. A challenge to the qualities of one man. The skills of a river pilot are as varied as the shipping he must handle. And no river has more variety than the Thames, greatest commercial rivers in the world, and and the hundreds of pilots who work it are among the aristocracy of their profession. To confirm this, you need only ask the crews of the ships they handle. Cruise ships like the Durango, home. This building is a vital nerve center. First, a call at the chart room to meet the hydrographic officer. There is nothing constant about the Thames, and every day the pilot must acquaint himself with the state of the river. Are there any changes in the navigable channels? Are there any new wrecks, or have any existing ones been moved by the tide? What is the position of moored shipping, like dredgers? Such information is absolutely essential. It is hard enough navigating. Meet a man on his way to work. The man is Mr. Brain. His work is among the most interesting you could find. Mr. Brain is a river pilot, a member of a very proud and select profession. His craft is as old as seafaring. His skill is the product of a tradition which has grown up along the waterways of the world. The Thames is his particular concern. London River, the greatest river in Britain. Like in the operations room, the pilot consults a large wall map which shows the exact position of all shipping in the river. The PLA maintains radio telephone contact with all vessels wishing to enter or leave the Port of London. Along the any seafarer starting the day, he makes his own careful assessment of the weather. Visibility is all important when you navigate such a busy, congested river as the Thames. Following our pilot, we arrive at the Gravesend headquarters of the Port of London Authority. The tidal stretch of the Thames, nearly 70 miles of it, is under the jurisdiction of the PLA. For the 200 pilots who operate from Gravesend, leading a large ship among the visible obstacles on a river. But there is a host of hazards beneath the surface, and the pilot must have an exact picture of what they are and where they lie. Already we can see something of the complexity of his job and the responsibility he must take. And we can appreciate the important service rendered by the Port of London Authority. A service first to the pilot and ultimately to the thousands of ships using this great artery of commerce.